Good afternoon. My name is Brittany Bernard, and my paper is called Happiness and Productivity, and I found it on the Journal of Labor Economics. I picked this paper because I figured as a contributing citizen to society where I have to basically have a job to sustain any kind of life or any kind of habits or anything that I wanted to support, that you have to have a job. And so why not, show and learn more about how productivity coming from us from employees, how it is directly related. And if you think about it, it really is directly related to like our well-being, our happiness, because if we aren't happy in our job, if we're not feeling like we're appreciated or that we are doing a good job, we're not being told that we're doing a good job, then we wouldn't want to be there. We wouldn't be coming to work, So, I was mostly attracted to this because I wanted to learn more about how exactly, and with factual studies, how happiness can be directly related to my productivity per se, and my performance in my own job, in my own life. The sole purpose of this paper is to show you factual information about the correlation between levels of productivity that comes from different aspects of happiness based on a couple different experiments where different treatments are given within those experiments in the article that I found. So, basically, there are 4 different experiments that are talked about in this article. I'm going to give you a little summary of them, and then since we had to have a table or a graph, I picked just one of the experiments and recreated that, so I'll go more in depth into that experiment. So the first and second experiments that I read about in this article, they were pretty much based upon the same things. The treatment that they call the experiment, it was basically the same thing. What they did is they showed a group of individuals a comedy clip, and then did just, questionnaires. And the difference between the first 2 experiments, because they showed both groups a comedy clip, but the difference was how they I guess, how they went about doing like the questionnaire to see how, or to find out the results from how that comedy clip affected each person. So, so the results were more casual than the results. The results in the first one was more casual than the results in the second experiment. The largest boost of productivity came from those individuals that received the highest level of improvement in happiness. So, I think that means that the people that got the most productivity boost was the ones that were what got the most enjoyment and most happiness out of that clip, that thought it was the funniest. And those were the first 2 experiments. In the third experiment, which is the one I'm going to show you the graph about, and it's a bar graph or a column graph, whatever you want to call it. But in this experiment, I was most intrigued, and I will go into further detail with. It was a different treatment being used. So instead of a comedy clip, they used like food and drinks. They said that they had used like bottled waters, chocolates, and like a different assortment of fruits to entice and produce higher productivity levels within their group. The treatment option seems the best to me. I thought it seemed the best, most realistic option that employers could actually use within like a day-to-day like actual work setting, because you don't really see employers that would just be showing comedy clips in the break room or something to get productivity levels increased or happiness levels increased within their workers. So I did think that this one was one of the most realistic options. So I thought it would be easier to kind of explain that graph and everything to you. And then in the final experiment, the individuals are put through like a bunch of different, so each experiment had like different levels and different questionnaires that they would use. But in this last one, they were put through like a bunch of stuff. So they were put through a questionnaire, a productivity task, a certain math test, and then they were informed about a payment system that was going to be allotted to them after the experiment was over with. And then they were given one final questionnaire, and this was the one that was like a lot different than the other ones, because this one, instead of it all being like good things and like how happiness kind of brings about productivity, it also did a final questionnaire that was designed to determine if the individuals had experienced any bad life events, such as bereavement, so like a loss of a family member or a close friend, life-threatening illnesses like to them or to any like family members, and it said even a divorce within like their household, so like kids that have parents that got divorced, or even older adults that had parents that got divorced, or maybe a husband where he's getting divorced from like his wife. So they did that last questionnaire to study those traumatic experiences in those individuals' lives, and to see how that could have a huge influence and input on a worker's productivity levels. There, of course, was a control group that was labeled a non-bad bad life event group. The individuals that did not incur a bad life event did label themselves noticeably less happier than the others that did go through a bad life event. So by them being less happy, they were also less productive. Through all these experiments, though, there was, control groups in all of them. So, like in the third experiment, where there was a treatment group that is getting, those snacks provided to them and then getting observed, there was also, control group that is also getting observed, but they're not receiving those snacks. So that's kind of how they based it off of, was a control group and a treatment group. Overall, through all these experiments, it was stated that individuals have 12% greater productivity compared that received the treatment, that were in the treatment groups. They had 12% greater productivity compared to their untreated counterparts. Okay, I have chosen to create, it's a bar graph or a column graph. I think they're both pretty much the same thing, and just one is a different way. But the graph that I chose shows a correlation between two different groups. A group of individuals who received the happiness treatment is what they called it, and a second group of individuals that did not receive that treatment, the control group. In this experiment, there was 148 individuals, 74 who got administered the treatment and 74 who didn't. The happiness treatment that is being used is chocolates, fruits, and bottled water drinks. The control group is a group that didn't receive any treatment. The treatment was given, so they were given the snacks and the water and were told to sit for 10 minutes and eat and drink immediately after registration, just before the main experiment. These 10 minutes mirrored the same 10 minutes of the time spent watching, like in experiment 1 or 2, the comedy clip, that was, used to produce hopefully the same results. The instructions were identical also to the first experiment, with an exception. So instead of just doing the treatment and then doing like the questionnaires and everything and getting the results from that, they were told, spend that 10 minutes before registration and stuff and eat and drink. And then the exception, they were told right before the experimental instructions, so the main experiment, they were told to stop eating the snacks and drink until the end of the experiment where they could finish those snacks. There were 4 control groups in this particular experiment that didn't receive any snacks, but were asked to sit the allotted 10 minutes also without the treatment being offered to them. This was to ensure that any effects to the individuals was not due to the additional minutes of experiment time for the treatment group. These treatments were administered through a laboratory and at a 95% confidence interval. These individuals in the particular experiment, given the specific treatment, can be clearly interpreted from the graph, and I'm going to show you, that after receiving treatment, each individual displayed a higher productivity level than those that were not receiving the treatment. So, just like in the other experiments, productivity is proven to be higher within the treatment group than it is in the control group. This experiment is similar to other treatments. For example, it is similar to experiment 1 in most aspects other than the actual treatment that's being given. All right, I'm going to turn this. You can see that. All right. All right, so in that graph, the light pink is going to be the individuals that were untreated, and then the darker orange or reddish color is going to be the ones that did receive the treatment. And obviously you can tell just by that graph that the ones that were treated obviously had a higher level of happiness, a higher level of productivity than the ones that were untreated. All right, so in conclusion, I found that the most interesting part of this paper to me was that there was actual facts. There was an actual study that was done to show how much of an impact our happiness and our well-being as an employee is actually being affected at work by our employer, and how they can have such a huge impact and can change how your feelings toward that company and toward coming into work every day. I had never realized how much difference that it does make on your job until, reading about this article and kind of just reflecting on it while I'm at work myself, But it does make a difference whether you're happy or even satisfied with what you're doing. who you're working with, where you're working. And to sum all this up, I just want to say that a couple key takeaways is one, most importantly, happiness and productivity performance